The opening scene of the movie shows Jack, a strong and brave young man, using crutches to move around. Due to his injured leg, he has a little bit of a trouble walking. But things are gradually getting better. Two high-ranking officials ask Jack to join them for a secret meeting. They want to hear a thorough account of his time spent in China, including the risky escape he made and what happened thereafter. They remind him that President Roosevelt is in charge of both him and the entire raider force led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. After his duty is done, Jack starts talking about what he found out, while attempting to disguise his nervousness. He explains the intricate strategy the USA took to attack Japan, while also cooperating with the Chinese leadership to resist Japanese forces. Following this scenario, we are transported back to an important time when American soldiers are getting ready to depart for Japan. Around 700 miles off the coast of Japan, on the carrier Hornet, an aircraft takes off. We depict the Marines experiencing a mix of joy and anxiety at that very time. Jack served as the airplane pilot with a crew of 4 that night. Taking off from the ship, they flew over Tokyo and launched an attack. In the midst of these dramatic events, the scene switches to an oriental woodland in a Chinese region. The camera captures the delicate beauty of morning dew shimmering on plants, as well as the singing bird's harmonic symphony. As she runs her hands through the bamboo trees, the attention changes to Ying, a young woman. Following that, we see her returning home, where she asks her daughter Nunu if she is ready to go to school. The following shot depicts the tranquil environment as Ying walks Nunu to school, their steps reflecting a strong relationship before they bid each other a loving farewell. As soon as she reaches her house, we depict her taking care of her silkworms and expertly weaving beautiful cloth out of them. She is making a beautiful purse, skillfully affixing bright yellow flowers to it. She intends to sell her work and is looking forward to the potential revenue from that sale. Apart from that, Jack and his team are actively participating in the launching of missiles which send parts of town engulfed into flames and chaos. After that, Ying makes her way to the center of the town in an effort to sell her homemade goods and make a little money. She quickly completes her task and then goes to pick up her daughter from school before going for a short walk. They run into Kai, a good friend of Ying's late husband, while they stroll lazily around. Kai extends cordial welcomes and brings up Ying's mother-in-law, who has expressed her displeasure at their choice to live independently rather than with her. However, Ying, unwavering in her decision, emphasizes their current happiness and her successful silk business. Nunu's quiet behavior is something Ying notices as they make their way back home. The little girl shares a terrible fact while wiping away tears. She is a victim of bullying at school, since she is the daughter of a widow. Later, when Ying finally makes it to their home, she retreats to a secret haven where she prudently keeps her hard-earned cash in anticipation of an uncertain future. Two eminent Chinese commanders remain alert in a different scene, as they await for the impending arrival of American soldiers at the Chinese border before sunrise. Jack and his crew unfortunately run into difficulties, such as poor weather and fuel usage problems. They make the decision to change direction and head for Zhou Airfield. However, the Chinese officers are confused by a misdirected phone call, which leads them to believe that an unforeseen enemy attack is taking place. They mistakenly turn off all lights, including the runway lights set up for Jack's team. Jack offers a risky plan B involving parachuting in the absence of visibility. On the other hand, Nunu has the chance to have a better education if they move to the city, according to Ying, who brings up the idea while they eat their evening meal together. Ying expresses her anger at how society views widows and the bullying Nunu endures at school, while tinged with sadness. Suddenly, the sound of faraway warplanes prompts Ying to quickly turn off the lights. As the narrative goes on, Jack and his crew cannot control the aircraft. That is when Jack passes commands for descent in the middle of the uncertainty. Since the night is filled with crashing planes and the dread of war, Nunu and Ying are likewise surrounded by a sinister atmosphere. In the next scene, Nunu begins her routine journey to school through the tranquil woodland as the morning breaks. Blood spots on the ground, though, cause her to stop in her tracks today. She notices Jack motionless from a tree as she glances up. She quickly hurries back home to notify her mother, Ying. Ying follows Nunu to see, even though she at first doesn't believe her. They rush over to Kai's house right away to ask for his help. The three of them approach the place where Jack is, with Ying explaining to Kai what is going on. When they learn that Jack is an American, they come up with a plan that will save him. They are aware that while the Japanese army is hostile toward the Chinese, American soldiers are not. Kai decides to keep Jack concealed, since he knows the Japanese could be looking for him. Everyone pledges to keep the location a secret, even from their family and close friends. The Chinese army also admits that their presumptions on what happened the night before were wrong. They discovered that the signals they mistook for Japanese bombs were actually American. They alert the lieutenant to the fact that the Japanese are on the lookout for them, at which point they hastily decide to leave the airfield. On the other hand, and indeed, the Japanese soldiers head to the destroyed aircraft before arriving in the village and interrogating the residents. When they are trying to identify the head of the village, Kai steps forward. The Japanese warn the locals that if they don't reveal the whereabouts of the Americans, awful things will happen. When they force Kai to kneel, he glances at Ying as if to warn her not to speak, even if it means that he will suffer harm. Kai collapses as a result of a gunshot. Everyone is terrified and outraged. Due to what took place, Ying decides to defend Jack in remembrance of Kai. Therefore, she delivers Jack food and drink. Ying continues to be friendly to Jack by giving him water and food from her embroidered bag. Their tranquil moment is quickly disturbed, though, as Japanese soldiers appear to be approaching closer. Due to a recently found parachute that they believe to be the soldiers, they are on a mission to search for him in the forest. Acting swiftly, Ying leads Jack to a safer place and hides him in a cave beneath her home. She gives Nunu, her daughter, the strict order to keep quiet and blend in. In the next hours, Jack's frail condition becomes apparent, as he refuses the food that is brought to him while his body fights a high fever. Ying's nurturing instincts, however, take center stage. She attempts to feed him as much as his poor state will allow, while applying herbal treatments with tenderness to comfort his aching leg. Ying's embroidered purse is found by the Japanese soldiers when they arrive at the cave. A detailed research of its owner is prompted by this revelation. The next sequence takes us to Nunu's school that has a sudden turn of events when the stern captain unexpectedly shows up and interrupts the ongoing lesson. The exact bag in question is in his possession. In an effort to gain attention, he questions the teacher and the students as well. Nunu feels her heart race as she observes her mother's creation, but she manages to keep a straight face and denies knowing who the bag's owner is. Nevertheless, the captain's sharp senses start to question her claims. Nunu is eager to share the event that has occurred with her mother as soon as school is out. And once Ying finds that her daughter did not provide any evidence against her, she feels relieved. The captain nevertheless pays an unannounced visit to Ying's house, since his suspicions are still quite strong. Ying is interrogated by the captain about her missing spouse as he meticulously examines every room of the house. Ying manages to remain calm in the face of her internal anxiety and extends the captain a cup of tea. In the end, he gives up looking because it turns up nothing. When the rainy night skies become darker, Ying offers to temporarily free Jack from his captivity in the cave, with the understanding that he will be hidden once again, should threat arise. While he settles into his seat, Ying gives him some water with a soft touch. Jack takes the chance to speak with Nunu when Ying is immersed in cooking the dinner. In an effort to establish a connection, he introduces himself, displaying his whistling skills by singing an American song. Nunu jokes about Jack's appetite at the dinner table, since he seems hungry. Jack attempts to communicate with Nunu and Ying non-verbally using gestures and drawings shortly after eating. Jack is incredibly curious to know about his 4 other crew members. By using her hands, Ying tells him that they have been transported to jail. Jack, who is getting worried, tries to find out more about where they are, but Ying is unable to comprehend him, and instead concentrates on cleaning the table with Nunu's help. Ying afterwards leads Nunu to her bed and urges her to rest properly. Now that her daughter is settled in, Ying concentrates on her profession, meticulously making silk. Jack, however, is still laying on the ground and fixated on Ying. They exchange a few looks briefly, which reveals an unsaid bond. Eventually, Ying makes her way back to Jack's side and provides him with some brand new clothing from her husband's closet, as well as water to wash himself. The scene changes when Ying curls up next to Nunu, ready to sleep. She observes Jack having a little dip in the water as he is shirtless through the door opening. Ying's attention is briefly caught by his bare, slim body. The next morning, Ying prepares herself to accompany Nunu to school. Ying gives Jack the order to hide under the floor until she returns, as she is always concerned about the threat presented by Japanese forces. Jack's caution is overruled, though, by his curiosity and desire for fresh air. He silently comes out of his hiding place and moves outdoors as soon as Ying and Nunu depart. Despite being a delightful distraction, the breeze has its own dangers. The course of Ying's day involves a mixture of obligation and responsibility. When she provides her silk skills in exchange for a few products, she learns that the 4 arrested Americans met a tragic fate and were executed. With this knowledge, her heart feels heavy. While on her way back home, she encounters Jun, the instructor, who inquires about the bag that the Japanese found. Ying runs home and claims she had nothing to do with it, only to find Jack fixing it while perched on the roof. Ying brings Jack back home and warns him of the threat his presence poses, as frustration gives way to firm words. As the situation becomes more tense and emotional, Ying's worries for both herself and her daughter come to the fore. Jack argues his point and claims that it is important to fully understand what is happening outside. Ying starts to cry as a result of her perplexity and dread. After a while, Jack enters the room and apologizes for his actions when she returns. He agrees that since it is her home, he is unable to behave any way he pleases. He lets her know that he's heading down. In an effort to reach an understanding, Ying asserts that he is permitted to hide if he hears approaching footsteps, emphasizing that communication is not limited by language. A new scene emerges as Ying pays a visit to her in-laws, a visit flavored with duty. She provides them with money from her silk sales, a visible sign of sympathy following her husband's passing. As the topic of the guerrillas comes up, Ying's interest prompts inquiries regarding their role. Although her father-in-law says they would probably help the missing American pilot, tensions increase when the precise spot of the guerrillas is brought up. He says secrets are kept close to the vest. Ying's mother-in-law recognizes her preoccupation and associates it with her gloomy behavior during Kai's funeral. Ying responds to the remark with a range of emotions and says that Kai was a good friend for her. However, Ying leaves quickly after hearing rumors that Kai was in Ying's house and her mother-in-law's accusations. This causes her to feel both sad and angry. After getting Nunu up from school and returning home, Ying starts cooking dinner. Her affection takes over here. She finds herself compelled to take care of Jack's obvious anguish due to leg pain, despite the things she has to complete. She asks Nunu to shut the door after her, and she heads to the forest in order to collect bamboo and make a temporary crutch for Jack, out of her concern. This act of generosity reflects their growing relationship and their growing closeness. We see Jack and Nunu's connection growing as he teaches Nunu how to whistle a popular American song. Soon later, Ying comes back to her house holding 2 bamboo logs. She wastes no time in getting to work on creating a crutch, cleverly weaving silk between the bamboo pieces. Jack and Nunu are seated at the table, amused and interested expressions on their faces. Jack patiently teaches Nunu the English numbers, while Nunu gladly instructs Jack on the Chinese numbers, as Jack repeats them after her. As the silk takes shape in Ying's skilled hands, she sometimes looks up from her work to see them around the table. As Jack and Nunu's friendship develops as a consequence of their time together, her heart is warmed, and a contented smile spreads over her face. As she reaches Jack, Ying gently completes the crutch and hands it to him. Jack's eyes light up as soon as he receives it. The crutch, designed to enhance Jack's mobility, is nothing but proof of Ying's thought. Later that evening, when it starts to rain again outside, the cozy interior of the house becomes a sanctuary from the cold, foggy weather. The food is heated, and the three put it together on the table. Jack takes some time throughout the meal to give Ying his sincere gratitude. He thanks her for everything she has done to ensure his security and comfort. Ying nods, her expression of pleasure shining. Nunu's attention suddenly turns to the ceiling during their dinner conversation. She questions Ying with the wonder of a little kid, and Ying happily replies that Jack mended it while she was at school. Nunu smiles at this realization. We depict them appreciating an enjoyable break from the dangers they face outside, as a calm and joyful atmosphere surrounds the room while they eat. The next scene shows Ying carefully healing Jack's legs after she puts Nunu to sleep. Jack kindly extends a hand to Ying. She holds it and allows the gesture to carry on. The palpable sense of possibilities in the air grows as they become aware of their growing attachment for one another. She softly moves Jack's hand to rest against her face, showing her developing affection for him. The night goes by calmly, and the next morning we hear Ying continuing her work as we hear the gentle rustling of silk. The world outside of their safe house appears unimportant and far away. The peace is then disturbed by a knock at the door. Ying glances at Jack for a fraction of a second, her heart skipping a beat. Jack rushes to the cave with a sense of urgency, his circulation echoing the dread in the air. When the door opens, Captain Shimamoto walks in, and both his presence and its surprise are undesired. As she considers every scenario, the horror on Ying's face intensifies. The captain gives Ying an authoritative yet curious look as he enters. He asks her cold-bloodedly why it took her so long to open the door. Ying responds quietly, saying that she was engrossed in her work. Shimamoto looks around the place as his attention occasionally rests on the table. He recalls a prior encounter in which Ying had offered him tea, and he requests that Ying offer the same generosity to him again. Ying complies, her movements executing a careful dance of politeness to hide the stress. Shimamoto is sitting at the table, sipping his tea and scanning the room with narrowed eyes. Unbeknownst to him, Jack is watching the unfolding action from his covert viewpoint under the floor with alert eyes. The mood changes subtly as it becomes clearer what the captain plans to do. He gestures for Ying to sit next to him with a strange familiarity. Throughout his tone, he asks her to comfort him. Ying cannot mask her discomfort as her nervousness is clearly visible. Shimamoto, nevertheless, pursues her in other ways as well. The more he draws Ying in, the more insistently he displays his attitude of entitlement. A dubious request is given when he tells her to take off her top. Ying recoils as her hands begin to tremble, and her eyes widen in astonishment and dread. Shimamoto grows angrier and angrier at her rejection. Things go wrong when his dominance degenerates into violence. With each punch to Ying's face, he painfully reminds her of his control over her destiny. She screams and begs to be left alone, but she is overpowered and exposed. Jack's pulse beats faster as he watches this scary situation from his hidden vantage point. Seeing terror in her eyes, he is furious and determined to rescue Ying from the captain's ruthless hands. Jack retrieves his weapon, putting all of his courage into it. As he takes aim with strong hands, his heart is beating with adrenaline. The stillness in the room is abruptly broken by the sound of gunfire. Shimamoto's lifeless corpse falls, ending his reign of terror. Panic develops as the situation's reality sinks in. Ying has tears, relief, and perplexity all over her face. As soon as Jack comes out of hiding, he hurries up to Ying and asks if she is well, before immediately giving her instructions to assist him in concealing the captain's body beneath the floor. At Nunu school, in the meantime, children playing outside fill the air with their joyful laughter. The instructor Jun notices a peculiar sound in the midst of this bustling atmosphere. Nunu is gently whistling a song from another country. Jun feels a sense of urgency come over him as his instincts take over. He is certain that they should return home immediately. Nunu, however, maintains that her mother has not arrived yet. Despite Nunu's opposition, Jun takes her by the hand and leads her home. However, they are in for more from fate. Nunu's mother, Ying, notices the tension in the air at that same time and goes outdoors. As Jun and Nunu approach, there is a palpable sense of anxiety. Ying at first denies hosting the American pilot at her home, in an effort to keep it a secret. However, Jun does not give up. He enters the home resolutely and approaches Jack speaking in English. Jack responds by stepping out of the shadows, holding his gun. Jack and Jun are having a furious discussion. Jun sits down when Jack orders him to, clearing the way for an important discussion. Jun admits that he knows the guerrillas and provides a plan for helping Jack go to Chongqing aboard a secret boat hidden behind a nearby mountain. He promises Jack that the men will be coming to his aid by tomorrow morning. Jack tells Jun of Shimamoto's passing before they part ways, and opens the door to the secret cave. It becomes even more clear how urgent the situation is. Jun insists that they must go right away, and urges Jack to take Ying and Nunu with him. Following this heated encounter, Jun hurries back to the school, tells his students to leave, and then flies out on his bicycle to contact the guerrillas and notify them about the plan to help Jack escape. The anxiety increases as night falls. The Japanese army launches a house-to-house investigation to find the missing captain. Ying cuts a lock of her own hair in the middle of this upheaval, as if she is aware of her own fate. As they gather at the table at home, Jack, Ying, and Nunu's faces are etched with a mixture of excitement and dread. The sounds of Japanese soldiers outside become more audible. Ying tells Nunu to look into the noise outside, since she senses the urgency. Ying and Jack's feelings overtake them as Nunu leaves. They hug each other closely as they exchange passionate kisses, while Ying's cheeks are covered in tears. The sound of the approaching Japanese troops pierces the night as they are intensifying their grip. The escape plan put together by Jack, Jun, and the guerrillas is still in action. When the Japanese army enters Ying's home, they find the captain's corpse. Everything becomes quite erratic as a result. As daylight draws near, there are recurrent sounds of gunshots. Jack, Jun, and the guerrillas successfully take down a few Japanese soldiers in a tough battle, while also destroying an aircraft. The Japanese are making every effort to down Jack, but despite their best efforts, they are having trouble. Jun sacrifices himself heroically in the middle of the turmoil, confronting the Japanese officer head-on while holding a bomb. A resolute Ying, Jack, and Nunu keep fleeing in the direction of the boat with the guerrillas. The threat of looming peril and the shadow of loss hang heavily. Suddenly, fate takes a severe turn. As Jack asks Ying to take Nunu to the boat while he repels the Japanese troops, there is a thunderous crack that splits the air. After being struck by a sniper's bullet, Ying falls to the ground. Nunu feels as though time has stopped as she sees her mother's tragic fall. Jack rushes to Ying's side, his heart heavy with grief, but Ying's eyes are shut. Jack quickly but painfully drags Nunu to the waiting boat. In the middle of the confusion and pain, Jack comforts Nunu by holding her close, while she sobs out for her mother. Back at the office, Jack tells the American officers this turbulent story, in a voice that is resonant with grief and tears in his eyes. He describes how the Chinese government tried to separate them, but he overcame all obstacles to keep Nunu by his side. Nunu and Jack are still having problems as time goes on. Due to his duties at work, Jack is unable to adopt Nunu, but his captain provides an alternative. A Chinese couple has volunteered to provide Nunu a brand new future. Jack's wounded heart is troubled by this decision. He ultimately complies with his captain's orders, despite the fact that he is unable to escape the guilt of Nunu's losses. It is a heartbreaking scene we get to see between Nunu and Jack saying goodbye. They hug one another tightly when they bid a fond farewell and cry out openly, since their hearts have been broken. The distress of separation can be seen in this gloomy scene. Jack sits down to compose a letter for Nunu after 15 years, as the movie comes to a conclusion. His words serve as a reminder of how the past affects him today. He acknowledges that he has thought of her mother, Ying, every single day. In a confession that carries years of weight, Jack confesses falling in love with Ying. As evidence of his feelings, he encloses a strand of Ying's hair in the letter. While realizing that his own life is going to end, Jack praises her mother's bravery and sacrifice for China's pride and nationalism. This movie, based on true events, serves as a reminder that despite our differences and hardships, humanity transcends all, and we are capable of understanding and supporting one another.